Welcome to the Charlie Mike webinar series hosted by the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. Thank you for joining us today. We have to thank our sponsors, BAE Systems and Philips North America, for making this webinar series possible. Just a few notes. Of course, with Veterans Day is coming up, you will see a lot of veteran-focused events happening around the country. So the first one we have is the Department of Energy. They have their fourth annual Service Disabled Small Business Opportunity Day, which you could either attend in person in Washington, D.C. or virtual, and it's free. So if you want to do business with the Department of Energy, please join their event. You can also find us on YouTube. Any Charlie Mike series that you missed, any veteran special focus events, any testimonials are on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe today. This webinar is only 1 hour and is being recorded. The slides and recording will be available to you on Mondays. If you have any questions after this presentation, we'll open mics, you'll be able to answer your questions. And you may know me by now. I'm Earl Morgan. I'm the Program Director for the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. And I would like to welcome two very outstanding long members of the NVSBC. I'd like to introduce our 2022 Golden Age Mansfield Award winner, Bob Santmyer. He's the president and CEO of PenBay Technology Group. And his partner, John Manolios, Director of Business Development and Capital Management for PenBay Technology Group. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, and I will pass the baton to you.
Thank you, Earl. So while John brings up the slide presentation, let's do a quick introduction. As Earl said, I'm the president and CEO of PenBay Technology Group. We're a services of a veteran small business, and PenBay's been a member of NVSBC for 10 years now. And it's been a great organization to be part of. So if you're new or thinking about becoming a member of NVSBC, certainly something I would highly encourage. It's been very valuable in terms of our relationship with the coalition. And it's something that everyone should deeply consider as a term in terms of the value that they bring to your organization. John is going to bring up the presentation, so we'll go through the slides. At the end of the slides, we'll open up the mics, as Earl said, for any questions you might have. And if there's any slide you want us to go back to, we'll be happy to go back to that slide and elaborate further on any questions based on the presentation material. With that, I'll turn it over to John.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Earl, thank you for that introduction. Can you see the slides, Bob? Can you see them okay?
Yes.
You
Yes,
can.
I can see the slides, yes.
Great. So before we get started, just a little background on Bob and I. We have both been actively involved in industry groups for many years now. Bob was actually one of the original founders of the VETS industry group that transitioned to the VETS 2 industry group, V2IP. I was one of the original founders of the Vector industry group and have been actively participating in both up until I came to PenBay Technology Group several years ago. But what we're going to cover today is, and again, everyone's more than welcome to reach out to us after this presentation to talk more about how they can be involved in these types of groups. But on our agenda today is, what are industry groups? Why are industry groups important? How should you be involved with industry groups? I'm sorry, who should be involved with industry groups? How do you get involved in industry groups? There are some situations there where you have to be a little mindful of how your participation is handled. And of course, examples of industry group success. We've got a most recent example that we're going to do a deeper dive on when we get to that section. With that, I'll start off, Bob. What are industry groups? They're essentially a group of interested companies or organizations that work together to accomplish goals that are of interest to that group. When we talk about,
John, you want to advance your slides?
I did advance it. Is it not on the next slide, Bob?
No.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see that now, Bob?
Yes.
You can see that, okay. When I go to the slideshow, for some reason, it's not working, so I will just leave it as it is, okay.
Okay.
What are industry groups? Okay, again, a group of interested companies or organizations that work together to accomplish goals that are of interest to that group. Things that you might think about are going to be marketing a vehicle, preserving the vehicle, that type of those type of efforts. These groups market to and educate civilian and DoD agencies on the features and benefits of an acquisition vehicle. And the idea behind it is that they're representing all companies on that vehicle. These groups also discuss, network, and share the proven capabilities of interested parties or primes on an acquisition vehicle. I think that's probably one of the most important aspects of an industry group and what it does. The way we've operated within industry groups is we've put aside the interest of individual companies and focus more on the interest of the group and making sure that we are marketing that vehicle. Bob, do you want to do the next slide?
So actually, John, before you go on, just another point I'll make on this is what we find to be most successful is having a standard set of presentation slides, so that everyone is speaking to the same sheet of music, to use a vernacular there. So that way you're consistent in your messaging from company to company. In the case of VETS2, for example, there are 63 prime contractors. There are right now about 39 of those companies have participated to be part of the industry group. So those companies that are part of the industry group have the same slide deck to be able to present to the agencies to make sure that the message is consistent from company to company.
Yep, absolutely. And take that a little further, these are actually done in conjunction many times with the government as well. So using that VETS2 example, we worked with GSA in order to come up with slides and presentations that are in sync with what they are trying to convey to industry as well. So thank you, Bob, for that. Let's see here. Why are industry groups important? Bob, do you want to tackle this one?
Sure. Probably the most important aspect is the first bullet there, creating a unified voice. Again, you're speaking on behalf of the entire group, not just the individual companies. So your message to the government agencies you're speaking to, or whoever the audience may be, you're speaking on behalf of that group that you're representing. Another important aspect is the ability to be able to share information. So there are some specific examples we can give later, and one we'll talk about a little bit as far as one that was very important, to be able to share information between the industry group partners in order to provide, again, a single voice for industry. And that's extremely important. And how you do that is by sharing information. And don't look at each other as being competitors. If it's an industry group that's formed based on a particular contract vehicle, you're not going to be able to win that contract if the opportunity doesn't go into that vehicle, right? So up until that stage, you're partners. You're partners trying to work towards that vehicle. Once it's on the vehicle, then you can either team or you're competitors, right? So, and that's just the nature of the beast within government contracting, which I'm sure you're all well aware of. So, sharing that information up front prior to any sort of procurement activity is extremely important for the success of any industry group. And also it does create that collaboration for possible teaming opportunity as well, right? So there are often times where someone who may be a competitor in one situation, you may find them to be a great teaming partner or another situation. And building that trust and building that relationship with members of the industry group allows you to understand those companies that share your values and share your interests. And perhaps there's gaps that you can fill for each other in going after specific opportunities, either on that contract vehicle or some other contract that may not be on that vehicle that you're representing.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to add, John?
Yeah, so in addition to that, what we found working with SDVOSB or veteran-related industry groups is the collaboration with the NVSBC has helped tremendously. We're able to convey issues and discuss other issues on these platforms. One of the most recent examples of that is the CVE transfer from the VA to the SBA. That's become a topic of conversation in our monthly calls with GSA for Vets 2 industry group. But this is something where we are able to not only talk about the vehicle and market the vehicle and share information, but also bring awareness to teams as well. And I know other vehicles that have industry groups that are constantly sharing this information and opening up that opportunity. Bob, I don't know if you have any additional comments on that part of it.
No, that's okay.
Okay, great. So who should be involved with industry groups? Ultimately, if you are on a vehicle, it should be individual companies. But in addition to that, and I think an often overlooked aspect of it when you're considering joining an industry group is government agencies, and especially those responsible for the success of an acquisition vehicle. On our monthly calls, we have, this is both Vets 2 and Vector, we always invited the relevant, the interested parties from the government to join us on our monthly calls. We've had tremendous success with that. And one of the benefits of that is they are able to clarify issues, talk about upcoming events that are coming up, talk about DPAs, talk about who they're meeting with, so we can have a unified voice and follow up with a particular customer and make sure we are marketing properly. So this is a very, very important aspect of having that government participation on your monthly calls or any activities that you're doing. Also, anyone that may be interested and eligible. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the eligibility of being able to join industry groups. Some of them allow subs to participate. Others are only ask for primes to participate in those meetings and any activities. But anyone and everyone should be involved within industry groups, and it's very important to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's been created yet. So one big vehicle that's coming up that I'm sure everyone on this call is probably going to be involved in one way or another is Polaris. We are already having conversations about creating industry groups via the NVSBC for that vehicle, for the STVOSB track. So again, be involved, make sure you are, getting your name out there. Reach out to those that are currently working on those programs. If you're not a part of an industry group and you're working on a vehicle, reach out to the folks that are running those meetings and become involved in those. Anything you want to add to that, Bob?
No, it's good, John.
Great. You want to cover this one, Bob, how to get involved in industry groups?
Sure. The first two sort of go hand in hand, event participation and being an active member. So event participation would be things like the NVSBC events, things like the Charlie Mike series or the NVSBC dinners in the DC area, certainly the Vets conferences, Vets 22 this year, Vets 23 last year. Those are just examples of participating in events where you would be looking to be able to have conversations and be participating in some way with other organizations, SVOSB organizations or VOSB organizations that might be forming an industry group or already have one established, and be active in that. So be active with the industry group. Something that is extremely important to success of a program is the activity associated with that program by its members, right? So being an active participant, going out and meeting with agencies to represent, again, the industry group itself, not your individual companies. That is extremely important. One of the rules of engagement we have, for example, on Vets 2 and very much the same with VA Vector is that there must be at least two different companies going to an agency to represent the industry group. That way it's not one-sided. It's not just representing the company. Again, it's you have two or three companies that are there meeting with the agency representing that industry group. And so if you're going to be part of an industry group, then you need to be active in it. You need to be an active participant in those activities. As John mentioned, sometimes the industry group doesn't allow for subcontractor participation, but subcontractors can support companies that are eligible to be part of an industry group. And that's something to consider as well. So if you're in a situation where you are a subcontractor, you're not a prime, so you really can't be part of that industry group, you can still be active in that by supporting the prime contractor you're associated with within that industry group, providing them feedback, providing them information that is relevant to your particular area of expertise that you may want to make sure is covered within any discussions that they're having with agencies or others. An example again I'll give with SDOSBs for VETS 2, SDOSBs that are subcontractors can actually do more than 50% of the work, the way the contract is written. So we have subcontractors, for example, to PenBay PenBay Technology Group, that are VETS 2 subcontractors to us that have in the past on contract awards had more percentage of work than we did. Based on what they were able to bring to the table, right? They were able to bring incumbent work to the table, and we were able to give them a larger work share because they were an SDOSB. So if you are working with a prime contractor that treats it the same way, then that's something that you ought to be actively working with that prime contractor to make sure they understand how you can help them be successful by driving it to a particular contract vehicle associated with that industry group, right? So giving them that information up front as far as how you can actually support them in any of their initiatives will help the industry group as a whole. Anything else you want to add, John?
And the only other thing I would add is some of the support that I've received from companies is best practices from other industry groups. We did have some partners that provided some how they operate under vehicles like STARS and Alliant as well. So they provided some best practices that of course we adopted into our industry groups that have worked well. But I can't emphasize enough that event participation, that becoming an active member, and setting up meetings with customers so you can spread the word about a vehicle. It's super important and frankly our responsibility as primes on these. So that's all I have, Bob. So we talk about what industry groups are, how they operate. Well, what about industry group success? And I'll tackle the first one, Bob, if that's okay, and then you can sure. Tackle the second one if that makes sense. So VETS 2 GWAC our immediate experience has been with VETS 2 GWAC, of course, and utilization by civilian and DoD agencies. We've seen some significant success on the vehicle. It's been very productive. We've seen a lot of activity on the vehicle. And I think a lot of that is a result of the efforts that we made initially. Before the vehicle was even initiated and awarded, there were conversations going on regarding the industry group, and all the prospective VETS 2 primes got together and talked about how this group is going to operate. We were thankful that the NVSBC was able to help coordinate that effort. And once we got the notice to proceed on the vehicle, we were able to go ahead and start these marketing efforts. We see a lot of activity from the Army, the Air Force, Treasury, and I think a big reason for that is because of the amount of information and sharing that we do with these agencies. And we try to keep that going with monthly meetings. It's interesting because even with the pandemic, we still saw some decent activity on the vehicle. And of course, that's always a challenge when you're not getting face-to-face. But what we're seeing now is our ability to add events, set up a booth so we can talk about VETS 2 GWAC. If you're familiar with a lot of the other GSA vehicles, VETS 2 is pretty straightforward. Anything and everything IT, right? So we're able to market that vehicle and make sure it's out there. What I'd like to do, of course, and what we were doing prior to the pandemic was doing more face-to-face meetings with primes, and we saw a lot of success as a result of that. One direct example of that is with Treasury. I do recall it was several years ago. I think it was 3.5 years ago. We went down to Treasury in force and actually sat in front of procurement decision makers and talked about the vehicle. And we still see a lot of stuff coming out on that vehicle. So, Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. And then if you want to cover the vehicle preservation, I think this is a real important one for also to kind of dispel some of the myths that are out there about these.
So the next to GWAC, we are currently in the 5th year of the base period of that contract. This GWAC is base period of 5 years and an option period of 5 years. The option year or the option period for this contract begins February 2023. Last September of 2021, GSA announced that they were creating an SDOSB track for the GSA Polaris contract vehicle. This was perceived to be good news by GSA, and they wanted to make sure the VETS 2 prime contractors were all aware of what was about to be announced to all of industry. So they had a meeting with just the VETS 2 prime contractors to convey this news. This immediately raised some concerns as to what that meant for the exercise of the 5-year option period in 2023 for the VETS 2 GWAC. And the response that came back from GSA at that time was an unknown, right? They were not definitive in their answer as to what that really meant for the VETS 2 GWAC option period, the 5-year option period. All the VETS 2 prime contractors obviously had spent a lot of time and money to win those contracts and provided pricing for 10 years, actually 15 years. It was 10 years within the contract, and the way the contract vehicle or the contract document was written, a task order could be issued against that vehicle on the last day of the contract and go out another 5 years. So it essentially became 15 years worth of pricing. So that is something that raised a lot of concern for the VETS 2 prime contractors, as you can imagine, as to whether or not that was going to happen. So John and I, as the co-chairs of the VETS 2 industry group, essentially rallied the troops and became the lightning rod, for getting all the feedback and input and recommendations. And we became the face of the VETS 2 industry partner group back to GSA. And we had several high-level meetings with GSA to express the concerns of the VETS 2 prime contractors. We had VETS 2 prime contractors who wanted to write letters to Congress. We helped them with the drafting of those letters, so there was a common theme and message to make sure that there was no inconsistency in delivery of that information. So all that took place. So it was a combination of grassroots efforts with individual prime contractors talking to congressional representatives, as well as our talking to GSA and representing the industry group and all prime contractors on VETS 2 to GSA. And because of all that work and collaboration, we were able to get the GSA leadership in December of last year to state that they do intend to exercise the option period for VETS 2 at the appropriate time. And at this point in time, we're coming on to February 2023, and GSA is gearing up for the exercise of the next 5-year option period. So that's an example of how this industry group came together to be sort of influencer of decisions within an agency as to making sure that they are not hurting the organization or hurting the industry within the industry that they're trying to take care of and represent in some way. In this case, if they had gone with not exercising the option period, and if you are following GSA Polaris at all, you know that proposals for the SDOSB tracker now due November 4th of this year. There's no way they'd be able to evaluate all the proposals and do awards in time for the February 2023 end of the contract for the VETS 2 base period. So that was all part of the messaging from a timing standpoint as to what made sense on keeping the VETS 2 contract vehicle around for the 5-year option period. So that's a way that an industry group like this really came through and worked to the advantage of all the prime contractors and all those subcontractors that support those prime contractors. Anything else you want to add, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think I to this day I get the same questions. How did you guys do that? I mean, how were we able to do that? And getting feedback and getting everything organized in a very a very compelling manner to express to GSA what the concerns were, also what the concerns with Polaris were, with with them deciding to add the SDVOSB track and the hub zone track at the 11th hour. Did not give those companies much time to start teaming. So that was part of the reason that they decided to stagger the release of that vehicle. But we had spent a tremendous amount of time getting that feedback, getting it together in an organized manner, and after multiple calls with senior leadership at GSA, we were able to get that. And I can't say enough good things, not only about our team and our industry group for participating and being so involved in getting those letters out, those congressional letters out, but also to GSA. And I think GSA was very gracious with their time and opened the lines of communication with us and allowed us to have calls with them, read what we were providing to them, had the dialogue. I think that was a direct result of us having it so organized and not going in, guns a-blazing and being upset about the situation, which we were obviously very upset about it, but that's not the best way to handle that. So
yeah, as a matter of taking the emotion out of all the aspects of it and just delivering on the facts. And as John said, GSA leadership, they were extremely responsive and extremely willing to listen to our concerns. And a lot of this stuff they just didn't understand, right? They did not understand as far as the possible implications were, given the timing of everything. So we sort of painted that picture for them a little bit better, and they were very open into listening to that and understanding our concerns and then addressing them, and they did.
You're certainly going to get much better responses that way, but we are appreciative for that. I also have to commend the NVSBC for their involvement in that. They did help provide feedback on our position papers, and it gave us some suggested course of action to help address these concerns and make sure the vehicle's there. So with that, there's a lot of speculation out there. Is VETS 2 still going to be there? No, it will definitely be there. It's been, it's not going anywhere. The option period will be exercised. So.
And NVSBC did help us also facilitate those initial meetings we had with GSA leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. With that, anything else you want to add to that, Bob, or the other sections? We have some. Here we are. Questions. Again, here's our contact information. If you have questions, whether it's how do you participate in these groups, how do you get them started? Bob and I have done it for 2 separate industry groups. We're happy to help share best practices. If you are looking to join teams, we're happy to help facilitate that as well for our vehicles, VETS 2 GWAC, for example. But with that, Earl, do you have any questions teed up?
I just turn on the microphones, and if anybody has any questions, ask away, please.
And I think I've got, actually, I did get a question the other day that I can share, Earl, if no one has one immediately. So.
Looks like everybody's being shy here.
No problem. I've actually got one question that I received, and this actually came up just last week from a peer company that is on VETS 2. And they had asked, why would I get involved in an industry group or participate in something with my competitors? And that is something that's been addressed on many occasions via our industry group. One of the challenges that we always have with industry groups is many times you'll have a company or not in this case, in this case, it was quite a few companies that just for some reason or another do not want to participate in industry groups, don't want to share best practices, don't want to participate in marketing, don't want to be involved in that. And I will say this, that part of our responsibility being on a vehicle is to help market the vehicle. And, if we're able to coordinate efforts, open up doors for our partners to go in and talk about the vehicle and help market the vehicle, it benefits everyone in the group. I've sat down side by side with my competitors at multiple agencies, whether it's with the VA, with the Army, you name the agency. I've sat with people and marketed this specific vehicle, and I've done it with with other vehicles as well, to make sure that we are bringing the business to the vehicle so we can compete. I'd rather, my thought behind it is there are 63 primes on VETS 2 GWAC. I'd rather compete against 62 other companies rather than, thousands of other companies if it ends up on a small business track or an SCBO speed track. Bob, do you want to add anything to that? Because I know you've run into that quite a bit as well.
Yeah, no, that is something that is extremely important, is to understand that, and if you've been in this industry for a while, I've been in government contracting for almost 30 years now. So, one day you're competing and one day you're teaming together, and that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to federal government contracting, right? So, in cases with the industry group, your intent is to try to make sure you're in a position to be able to compete for that opportunity. So John's point is very valid, and something that anybody who's part of an industry group has figured out, right? So it's a matter of pushing the contract opportunity to the vehicle where you can compete against that person you may be sitting next to try to drive it to that vehicle, and that's fine. I've had situations, for example, where I've gone in with two other VETS 2 prime contractors going in to meet with Department of Energy to present the contract vehicle, the VETS 2 contract vehicle. And then once the opportunity comes out on VETS 2, then, okay, now we're not sitting side by side, we're competing against each other. But we wouldn't have had that shot if we didn't have that meeting, right? So that's really the point. And the way you need to look at it from the standpoint of the value of the industry group and how you can work together collaboratively as a team in order to have the opportunity to be able to compete.
Okay. We do have one question that came in from Douglas Anderson, and he writes, how many industry groups are there?
That's a good question. I will tell you this. I would suspect that as many contract vehicles, and if we're talking about contract vehicles, government contract vehicles that are out there, I would assume that there's probably at least one per vehicle. Bob, is that an accurate statement?
It's possible. There are some out there that I'm not sure that they have industry groups. One I can tell you for sure is, and which is, John mentioned that I was one of the founders of the original VETS industry group, which is the one before VETS 2, the old VETS GWAC that was created under the Executive Order 13360. So I was one of the founding members of that. We modeled that industry group, the original one, which then became the model for the VETS 2 as well as the VA Vector Industry Group. We modeled that one after an Alliant 2 small business industry group that was formed. So, we know Alliant 2 small business has an industry group, and participation in that industry group at the time, which is going back probably about 10 years ago, was about 27 members out of the total number of Line 2 small business primes. And when you take a look at what the performance was at that time, as far as how the Line 2 small business prime contractors that were part of the industry group had done compared to the others that were not part of the industry group, they actually were doing much better in terms of task rewards than the other ones. So that was sort of the foundation that we saw as being a model that works for an industry group, and that's why we were doing that for the VETS GWAC, the original VETS GWAC, in the way we approached it, and using sort of the same rules of engagement that they did under Line 2 small business. I don't know if CISP 3 has an industry group. We haven't found anybody who's part of that, but I'm sure there are other contract vehicles out there that might be agency specific or DoD specific. For example, there may be something under ITES 3S where they formed an industry group, or perhaps under ITS CS, somewhere along the lines. I'm sure there are, but this is not a new concept. I go back to years ago, even before we formed under VETS. I was doing some work out of Gunter Air Force Base, and there was a group there that had formed called the Coffee Clutch, right, which was an informal industry group, where we would get together and share intelligence, share information, and then perhaps go into an Air Force customer together to talk about what the capabilities are of the individual companies. So even that on a smaller scale, you can call it industry group.
Okay. We do have another question. It's from Stephen Williams. He writes, how to keep from being a marketer of the industry group for a small pool of partners to win a bulk of the business.
So I just want to make sure. So say that. Can you repeat the question just so I understood it, Earl?
All right, Stephen is writing again. Okay. How do you keep from being a marketer of the industry group if a small pool of partners to win a bulk of the business? And Stephen is writing up. I think he's writing a follow-up question to that as well.
Okay.
So, John, you want to answer this? So I think I understand. So if you have a smaller group, but you're representing the entire group of prime contractors, right? So you're essentially not. So if you're representing the entire, if it's a contract vehicle, and if I'm wrong in providing this answer as far as what you're looking for as far as a response, for example, we mentioned there's 63 prime contractors on VETS 2. 39 of them are part of the industry group. So when we represent the VETS 2 partners, we're actually representing all 63 prime contractors, not the 39. So there's no way you can really just limit it to the number of people who are participating within the industry group. You're representing the contract vehicle itself is a better way to look at it. Okay. Now, one advantage I will say is if you're part of that industry group where you're representing the entire contract vehicle, that means you're having face time with that agency. So that agency is going to get to know who you are in relation to that contract vehicle, you as a company, who you are. So that would have an impact or could have an impact based on looking at the potential bidders on who actually has proposed. They may say, okay, well, I know this person. They're the ones who came into my office and told me about, the capabilities of this particular contract vehicle, the capabilities of all the companies that are on that contract vehicle. So there's name recognition associated with that. So that's one advantage of being part of the industry group. And that actually may be why that the 27 or so that were part of the Line 2 Small Business Industry Group actually won more task orders than the ones that weren't part of the industry group because of being recognized as being leaders within that contract vehicle.
Okay. Stephen wrote back, FaceTime is a benefit. Got it.
Absolutely.
It definitely is. I mean, when we are talking to customers and they recognize you from the industry groups, and we're very fair too. I mean, everyone involved in the industry group is extremely fair to our friendly competitors as well. So, there's no axe to grind there. We're trying to market the vehicle, but this is still a relationship business. I know the pandemic has made it a little bit more difficult to do that, but it certainly is a handshake business. So I encourage those to participate, especially if you're on a vehicle. Find out who those leaders are. Go out there, meet with the customers, talk about the vehicle, talk about your competitors in a positive manner as well. I think that's a really important aspect of this. I don't think anyone could ever bring up a conversation where Bob or I have ever said anything negative about our competitors. We always have something positive to say about them. Look, there are our peers on a vehicle. We want to make sure that the vehicle is presented in a positive light as our competitors. So thanks, Earl.
Okay. Are there any more questions from the group? Going once, going twice, sold. Anyway, thank you for joining us today. It's been a real treat to listen to Bob and John to speak. Like I said, they've been long-time members of NVSBC, and I would also like to thank them for taking their time, because I know these guys are very busy with the industry groups. So thank you for taking the time to explain that to us. And now even I learned something. So, so until next time, thank you so much, and I will see you on next Charlie Mike. Thank you again.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
All right.
Bye-bye.